Hey, everybody, welcome to Text Request Talks, where we have conversations with business leaders about how they make things happen. Presented by Text Request, the business text messaging platform that lets you text from your office phone numbers directly on your computer or any other device. So you can stop making phone calls and start actually getting responses. Learn more at textrequest.com. Today, I'm talking with Frank Fiume, who was the founder, CEO, and chairman of I9 Sports. Now is see if I can get all these things right, consultant, mentor, author, speaker, and host of the Emerging Franchise Brands podcast. So, Frank, thanks for being here today.
Kenneth, thanks for having me on. And just to be clear, yes, I'm still the founder of R9 Sports, but I'm no longer with the company. So I'm no longer CEO and chairman.
Well, let's start there. So you started the company, I guess you ran it for 20 years and then sold it a few years back. So talk to us a little bit. What made you want to start this concept? I guess to explain what the concept is a little bit for us. And
Sure.
then I guess, yeah, start us there. I'll keep asking questions along the way.
Well, this goes back before I9 Sports. So I'm originally from New York, from the Long Island and Queens area. And believe it or not, I was playing a lot of amateur softball with my college buddies in those bar leagues. And this is when I was in my early 20s. And I noticed that the leagues would run horrible. And by day, I was in medical sales. I was a medical device salesman. And I would go to New York City and New Jersey and Connecticut. And I sold open heart equipment. Hated it. I had no passion for it, despite the fact that it was a lucrative career. And so on the weekends, I was playing softball with college buddies. Noticed that the leagues would run poorly, and I thought maybe I would start a league. I was really intimidated by it. Quite honestly, I'd never been in business before. And the more I looked into it, the more I realized, Kenneth, that there was a tremendous amount of profit that these guys were running these leagues using public facilities, parks and rec, schools, churches, colleges, wherever, and they were not running it professionally. It was so poorly run, and I thought, well, hell, I can do that. I mean, they were so badly run, but these guys were running leagues for like 20, 30 years. They had all the fields, quote unquote, locked up. And so I thought, I'll start just a small league. Nobody thought it was going to succeed. I was given all the reasons why I would fail. And probably the more reasons people told me I would never be able to do it gave me the motivation to try and do it. I was so naive at the time. Even my college buddies who we played in the same team were like, "Oh, you can't start a league. How are you going to do all this?" But anyway, long story short, I started chipping away and I started getting softball teams. And in my very first season, actually, I met my wife, she was my fiance at the time, and she helped to answer the phone and stuff while I was in medical sales during the day. We got 53 teams in our first season, and we knew we were onto something. We ended up a year later. We moved to the Tampa Bay area after we had gotten married, and we thought, okay, well, this thing in New York, this Long Island softball league that's doing pretty well, maybe it'll exist. Maybe we'll just start doing something in Tampa. Well, we kept the league going in New York, and it was doing really well. It kept growing by leaps and bounds. And actually, we got it up to almost 1,000 teams. And within 4 years, we were the largest private softball league in the state of New York, with almost just under 1,000 teams, which is wild. And at the same time, I learned in the late 90s that the NFL was introducing flag football, NFL flag, as a way of promoting the game of football in the communities. Now, I knew nothing about kids' sports. We weren't parents at that time. And in fact, my daughter was born the year we launched our flag football league in the Brandon area. But I knew how to run a league, and I knew that the NFL was onto something. And I knew that if I didn't jump on this, somebody else was going to. So we started running flag football in the Tampa Bay area, had it up to 3 locations. So with leagues in Florida for kids and adults for New York, how am I going to expand this thing? And so I became a student of franchising. I went to a lot of franchise conferences and spoke to a lot of franchise consultants, and inevitably decided that I was going to franchise this thing in 2001. Took about 18 months to get it going, but I9 Sports was born in 2003 as a result of playing adult men's softball in New York back in the 90s.
One piece in there that I love is that you saw somebody doing it and you said, I can do that better. And then you did
Oh, they
it.
were
And so
so
many
bad.
entrepreneurs are that way.
They were so poorly run, and they were people who were not, they weren't doing this. They were running a business and they didn't realize they were running a business. It was so fragmented. And I love fragmented industries. And of course, the amateur sports industry was highly fragmented. And The industry had been around for almost 100 years. I mean, if you think about it, um, football, tackle football, has been around since 1929, and Little League baseball has been around since 1939. Leagues have been run the same way for almost 100 years, and they're mostly run by volunteer organizations back then for the longest time. And I wanted to change that by making a league that was going to be super organized, and I wanted to offer a premium product because I really felt that um, people they deserved more, and people expected more. Consumers expected more in other parts of their life, but for some reason they accepted poor service in amateur sports, and I knew that we could be different.
How did you go from adult softball leagues to children's or youth flag football to expanding out? Did you, I guess, really what I'm looking for there is how did you get so many more people to want to join your league? Because you'd be competing with the YMCA's of every city and other leagues as well. So did you just get more people to want to play sports? Did you take market share? How'd you approach that?
Well, we just took market share, but once again, this was a lot of what I did was trial and error and a lot of mistakes along the way. I can tell you, any entrepreneur that's listening, one of the things I did right was that I wasn't afraid to make decisions. I made a lot of decisions. I made a lot of mistakes, but I learned from them really quickly. I'm really big on I'm okay with making a mistake, but make it fast and don't make the same mistake twice. So when I actually launched my franchise, when I launched I9, believe it or not, we were adult sports and kids sports. And the real truth is, I could not replicate my franchise with my franchisees. I could not replicate the adult sports success throughout the country. I had adult sports franchisees. They did not do well. I implemented the same formula. It just did not take. And so, by almost default, because my youth sports franchisees were doing well, I9 Sports became only youth sports. And we understood we were onto something. We learned quickly that we were in the mom business, and we took market share. The market is so huge. Once we understood who our target audience was, and I say that mom was our customer, in that we did a survey to all of our customers and learned that between 70 and 80% of our respondents said mom was the one registering their kids. And so once we understood who our target audience was, our marketing got so much more crisp. And quite honestly, when you're competing with Little League or YMCA or any league for that matter, it comes down to providing, you know, providing value added service, providing the best customer service, and giving the moms and the dads what they want, which was, being organized. We made sure that we were customer focused, we were convenient, and we made sure that we provided great safety for the kids.
So much of franchising is about replicable operations. Did you find that you could replicate the same processes and tactics and everything from city to city or territory to territory for the
Yes,
youth? I know the adults didn't work.
when we honed our youth sports model, in that, well, I should say, when I9 became youth sports, we started honing in on that model really, really closely and start sharpening the focus. And quite honestly, a lot of it was trial and error again, because my claim to fame was really adult sports. I ran that flag football league, as I mentioned, in Tampa Bay area, but I was not a youth sports expert. And so my franchisees, my first dozen, which, as we always know, your first dozen franchisees really create that culture. We rolled up our sleeves. We did a lot of things together, and we learned on the fly. A lot of what you're going to hear from me today are things of what not to do. Do as I say, not as I did, because I lived a very, very stressful life as a franchisor, because I sold my first business, my adult softball business, to fund I9 Sports. And so the way I was able to keep cash flow alive was through how I capitalized the business from selling the first one. But I sold franchises to keep the lights on in the early 2000s, and that is absolutely no way to do business.
Well, talk to us a little bit more about that grind, because for any entrepreneur, business owner, or even executives of larger companies, you're always on. And so how did you, I guess two questions here. How long did it take before you found that you didn't have to do everything yourself and there were some things you could either let go or hire somebody else to do? And then how did you keep yourself from just burning out completely?
Well, When I exited I9 Sports, it was recovering from burnout, so it was almost 20 years. But if we step back earlier in the years, look, it wasn't all me, and I had a great team of people. When I started out, the first hire that I had was actually my hire from my ABA. That was the name of the softball league. That was for my softball business, Kim Armelino, who is the MVP of our company, and she's the heart and soul of I9 Sports even today. And so Kim handled all the finances. I did hire a few guys to help us with running the leagues and business coaches. So it took some of the pressure off. But one of the things that was very stressful in my business was early on is that I didn't have anybody with franchise experience. So it was trial by fire. And I was the one doing franchise development early on, which I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I actually like the founder. If the founder is a salesperson, I actually like the founder selling franchises early on. There is absolutely nothing wrong with that, but obviously there's a big trade off. What changed for me, Kenneth, was that I realized that I had to hire for my weakness, and hiring for my weakness meant, yeah, I could do the details, and I did them, and I did all of the nuts and bolts, but it was not my wheelhouse. My wheelhouse was more the visionary stuff, rolling my sleeves up with my IT team and developing new technology, developing new programs. So when I realized I had to hire for my weakness, it was actually a great conversation I had with Brian Scudamore, the founder of 1-800 Got Junk. And I asked Brian, I was like, hey, Brian, I'm like, how do you know when you need a president and COO? And he says, Frank, believe me, you'll know when. And believe it or not, that conversation I had with him, the reason why I called him was because I was already there. Mentally, I needed somebody. And so I found a guy by the name of Brian Sanders, who Brian is the president of I9 Sports today, but he was the COO and president of my company when I hired him in 2008, an absolute dear friend. And we were in lockstep for nearly 20 years working together.
A lot of companies struggle with the transition from founder led sales to a VP led sales or somebody who's hired on. How did you make that transition? Or was there just a gap that you couldn't fill necessarily? It was always going to be different and you just accepted that?
Personal development is a huge part of my life and every part of my career. I'm a big Tony Robbins guy. I went to a Tony Robbins Date with Destiny event in 2008, and it was life changing for me. It was December 2008, and I had the realization that if you truly love your business, you give it what it needs. And sometimes it needs something more than you. And I realized in that 2008 Date with Destiny that me and my business, the identity was so intertwined. I was I9 Sports, I9 Sports was me, and it was super dangerous, Kenneth. And it was at that time when I realized I've got to get out of my own way, got to hire for my weakness. I believe it or not, I had just brought Brian on, but mentally I wasn't there yet until I got to Date with Destiny, where I realized I'm going to give this company everything it needs. It was so freeing because once I realized that I9 Sports was not about me anymore, and my goal was I9 Sports would live far beyond. Like, if you really love your company, get out of your own way. If your business is not about you, your business is supposed to serve others, supposed to impact others. And people talk a big game about how, impacting others and stuff. But truly, if you're really going to impact others, you got to bring people up. You got to bring them around, surround yourself with fantastic teammates who have their ability to also make change. And you want to cultivate leadership. And that forever changed my company. It got us through the recession without, a bat of an eye, which was very timely, of course, coming into 2008 with having that epiphany, so to speak.
What did the before and after look like, I guess, day to day between before the event and the epiphany and afterwards once you put that into place?
I would say probably my wife would say my home life got a whole lot better because suddenly, now don't get me wrong, my wife, she did a phenomenal job of always making sure like I was home in time for dinner to spend time with the kids and, play time and bath time and reading and everything else. So I always had that 2, 3 hour gap when my kids were really little. However, what changed for me was bringing Brian in to be COO and president, but more importantly, I empowered him. Like, he and I worked together and I gave him every part of the leadership position to run the company day to day. It was just so freeing for me because I showed up better as a husband. I showed up better as a father. Yeah, we travel a little more. I was still, going to the office every day. Maybe I took a vacation every now and then. But I think also it just allowed me then to focus on the things I was really good at and the things I love to do. And one of the things I loved to do was going into the IT bullpen and developing new technology and working with franchisees and developing a new sport. Like we developed T-ball and we changed our programming around. And I just got a chance to do the things that I love to do that I was good at.
What have you done on go? Actually, I'd be really curious for you to answer this question, especially since exiting I-9. What have you done ongoing to continue the personal development, to continue improving your personal skills, your managerial skills, just everything there?
Well, besides the fact that I joined Tony Robbins Platinum Partnership and, in the, about 5, 6 years ago, and I am a huge believer in, Tony's programs. And Tony's been a big influence in my life really since 1999. Or even earlier. I was one of those guys that bought those cassette tapes from his infomercial back in 1992 at like 3 a.m. when I was miserable in my medical sales job. But besides that, I do like going to conferences and events in leadership and business, and having a peer networking group I think is super important. So I'm a big fan of Roland Frazier. Roland has his Epic program, which talks about he's a big believer in the ability to acquire businesses, no money out of pocket. But Roland is such a smart business guy, and I've been able to rub shoulders with him and his folks. Since exiting I-9, I became a member of Tiger 21, which is a group of mostly entrepreneurs that have exited their business. And again, it's another peer group of folks that we relate to one another since exiting our business and talk about what's next in life. Because exiting your business sounds like the holy grail, but I've got to tell you that when you sell your business, the high is extremely short-lived, and it's extremely important to find a peer group of other people that have been through it, because you go through a mourning period. And I definitely went through that because I loved my company dearly. I didn't sell it because I hated it. I loved it because I felt like my dream was fulfilled and it was time for me to move on personally.
I imagine there's a lot of reconstructing you have to do as well whenever the business you created did become a part of your identity, even if you were trying to separate that, with other employees. Talk us through a little bit about the the process to sell it, or the decision making process to sell it. And in particular, I want your opinion here. There's often two competing bits of advice around selling a business. One is that a business is built to sell. So from the start, you orchestrate everything so that you can sell it later so that people want to buy it. The other hand, or the other side of it, is no, you build a business that is built to last, that is sustainable, is a good business, and then somebody will want to come get that from you. And so, do you have an opinion on one of those or the other? And then what did you do?
Uh, I'm not going to pull any punches here. I'm going to tell you that I'm going to talk out of both sides of my mouth. I'm going to be quite
Cool.
honest with you. I had no intentions of selling I9 Sports until I got to my mid to late 40s. And one day I said to my wife, this is getting dangerous. All of our capital, all of our net worth was in our company. If you had seen my 401k, it wasn't all that, an IRA, it was not all that impressive. We kept plowing money back into the company, and it had value. I didn't even know what the company was worth, quite honestly. This goes back to about 2015, 2016. And so I thought the company was getting dangerously large for one owner. And so I said to my wife, I think we should take some chips off the table. It was so hard because if you really love your company, like I was so passionate about it, but now it's almost like you have to take the emotion out of it. And let's not be stupid here. Something dramatic could happen. I mean, we don't know what, but there could be a crisis or some sort of threat where I could lose everything. And so it was that realization that, you know what, it's okay to take some chips off the table. I don't mean this to be, again, a Tony Robbins commercial, Kenneth, but I'm going to be honest with you. I went to a business mastery, which I've learned so much from Tony at that. And Tony said this quote. He said, success without fulfillment is ultimate failure. And if you no longer have passion for what you do, and Tony speaks a little differently at live events. Tony said, if you don't have passion for what you do, get the F out. You owe it to yourself and you owe it to your company if you really love it. And I felt like he was speaking to me. I loved my company. And yes, I had passion, but I was no longer personally fulfilled because I wasn't needed anymore. I had a tremendous team that did everything that needed to be done. And so I learned from at that event, I learned about doing an ESOP. And the benefit of doing an employee stock ownership plan is I get an opportunity to sell my company to my employees who don't need to have any money. It's no money out of their pocket. And anybody can look into an ESOP, so I don't want to, get into the nitty gritty, the nuts and bolts of doing an ESOP. But it allowed me to reward my employees as opposed to me selling it to a private equity. And I got a chance to maintain still control of the company and ownership. And I did that for a couple of years. And then I decided from working with a private equity firm that had a minority stake in, they were a great partner. LNC Partners, LNC Capital, great company out of Reston, Virginia, had a great relationship with them. And so I sold a piece to them. And then a few years later, when they became majority owners, they decided, you know what, it's time for us to sell. And so we were acquired by Roar Capital in October of 21. So that's sort of, as I went through that process, it was my initial thought was take some chips off the table, and then it sort of avalanche from there, so to speak.
Okay, one last question for you.
Sure.
If you're going to synthesize all of your experience and all the mistakes and failures and successes into one recommendation for business owners or executives, what would it be?
I said it earlier, hire for your weakness. That is the number one thing that the people that don't do it hit a ceiling and they can't figure out why they're not growing. And the people that are willing to get out of their own way and really hire for the weaknesses, those are the companies that explode. You have to hire for your weakness and a leadership position. I'm talking about hiring from the top down. Early on, I hired from the bottom up. It's a really stressful way of doing business, but when your capital is limited, you do what you can do. But once you can make that shift and really hire people that are leaders and that you can help empower, the ceiling is limitless.
Very well said. Frank, thank you so much for your time here and sharing all your expertise with us.
And it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me on.